Hey, how's it going? It's Keith Townsend from the CTO Advisor. You guys reacted fairly well to the last CTO dose or CTO Advisor video. We're kind of combining the two. The worlds are colliding that we did with Joe Pisker. So we're doing the next CTO Advisor podcast live. If you're listening to this, you can find me on Twitter at CTO Advisor. You can find us on LinkedIn, or you can go to YouTube/CTO Advisor to find these live versions of the videos. But feel free, we're going to continue to record the audio. We have a returning guest. We are in the middle of this COVID-19 based work from home movement. I'll probably be demonetized from YouTube because of it. Doesn't matter because I don't monetize the videos anyway. Haha, got you, YouTube. We have with us again Nathan Avery, Solutions Architect. Nathan, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm glad you got up. You at least have, for those listening, Nate at least has on a shirt. I don't know about the rest.
No, it's all good.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah. Waking up and having to do the work thing, it's easier to just follow the motions as best as possible and do what you normally do. You're just changing the location, but the work remains the same.
So Nate, it's ironic that we're talking about this topic, which is Zoom security, and we're having this conversation over Zoom. So what better experts to talk about Zoom security than people actually using the product?
Yeah, and we've been in it for a few minutes, and knock on wood, we haven't had anyone barge in yet and hijack this thing. So I think we're doing okay.
Appropriate pictures and just do weird stuff. And yeah. I've been running the Zooms for our church service, and I'll get into like some of the weird things that's happened, even with some of the mitigations I've taken. But I love you thought of this topic. You're kind of on the ground. You're both a collaborator and you serve customers. What's the deal? Like, I've used Zoom for the past 4 years probably, and I've never, other than a couple of years ago, they had that one security issue with the web server that they had running on Macs, etc. I've never really heard the conversation about security issues in Zoom. What's the rundown? What are the security experts kind of warning us about now?
Yeah, so the things that I've seen out there, reading the literature, same as a lot of us out here, you see the warning of encryption, right? Hey, is your communication encrypted from endpoint to endpoint, all the way through? There's a discussion about your data possibly going off to other places that you don't anticipate, like Facebook and others. And then there's the other issue of people just barging into the meetings, as we discussed. And what happens a lot of times is there will be a single article that goes over multiple vulnerabilities, and it is bad. I mean, when you have that many different things, but then they get conflated. And it all turns into this weird ball of, oh my goodness, should I even use this product any longer? And that's a legit concern. I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to downplay the security implications of this. But I think that we have to evaluate it the same way we would any other tool that shows security vulnerabilities. And you ask yourself, one, do these vulnerabilities apply to me in my particular circumstance? And two, is there a mitigation factor? And then I'll add a third one, which is all these things combined, is that enough for me to no longer use this product and go somewhere else?
So let's take this at chunks. Mm-hmm. The first, I think, architect level question, is Zoom the right product for a customer or environment in general? And when I say Zoom, I don't mean just Zoom. we're talking about WebEx, GoToMeeting, Blue Jeans, any of these SaaS services. If you were advising someone that was trying to follow like the DoD guidelines to security, would you recommend any of these SaaS services?
For super secret communication, unless the vendor has said, hey, we meet your guidelines, and maybe they've built a separate version of it that meets those guidelines on different infrastructure, then no, I wouldn't.
And I think, to be fair, I've seen people white label Zoom. So I think Zoom resells white box Zoom to other people. So you could Zoom from one secure location to another on a private network and additional layers of security. But as a SaaS service, generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend that someone needing that level, that DoD level security for secret and above. I wouldn't recommend they use SaaS. I don't know if any of these SaaS providers claim that they have DoD level security on any of their products. Not the generically consumer level solution.
Right, and that's a good point that you bring up. That Zoom in particular seems to have, I believe they do have a server side offering that you can run in your own infrastructure. I've seen some references to that. But I've also heard of other instances where vendors build solutions on top of Zoom. So they'll take that Zoom core and build their own stuff around it. So if someone builds a security shell around it that meets your needs, great. That may be a way around it. But again, now you're looking at other vendors that are still using that core.
So we've kind of established, if you're a top secret type of environment, whether you're government or you're Apple and you don't want the latest iPhone 12 leaked, generally speaking, you probably wouldn't use a public service like Zoom in general for sharing sensitive information. As I'm doing this and I read, wow, Zoom is selling my data to Facebook, which I'm a paid Zoom customer. The service that we're using today to do the podcast, I pay Zoom $15 a month for the privilege of doing this. So I expect them not to sell my data to Facebook. Like, what should be the expected transaction between a paid experience and what you've read Zoom is doing with potentially Facebook and my data?
So for $15 a month, I would expect the vendor to be very upfront about what it is I'm getting and receiving. I expect them to tell me very well where my data is going, who it's going to, what the expectation is in that relationship. However, I don't think a lot of us are using it for in a paid manner, right? So if I'm talking to friends, I'm talking to my mom, I'm talking to whoever, we're using the free version. And like the saying goes, if the service is free, then you are the product. So in a situation like that, I'm not really too shocked that my data could go elsewhere because other vendors have done that for so long. I think we're a little desensitized to it.
Yeah, and I think that was my follow-up question to that. You answered it already. Have we become desensitized to it that if I do anything on the internet and I'm not giving my credit card, well, that's a whole nother story. Maybe my credit card information would get exposed. But I'm expecting generally that if I'm paying you, your business model isn't to sell my data. If I'm not paying you, then anything that I do will be sold to another provider, I think is the trade-off most consumers are making. However, the thing that I am surprised at is, as a consumer, if I'm having my church service via Zoom and somebody jumps in and then shares porn, is that on me, the person who's consuming the service, or is that on Zoom for not protecting me from that?
Okay, so that's a situation where if you have an external entity dropping in, yeah, that's both, right? So the expectation should be for the vendor to provide the tools and a secure space, right? Some defaults that prevent such an action from happening. And then they should also provide you, the consumer, with an understanding of those tools so that they're enabling you to turn them on, turn them off, or whatever. Because there are certain situations where you may want to turn that off. You may not wish to provide a password, for instance, because you're trying to reach as wide an audience as possible and you're trying to lower the barriers for people to come in. However, the vendor should make sure that you understand the risks in doing so. And they should make sure that that default is in place to protect you. And then if you want to go against it, hey, that's on you, and you understand the risks.
So this is that shared security model that the cloud providers talk about all the time, that we're going to give you all the tools that you need to secure your S3 buckets. But if you don't apply them, then there's not really much we can do. However, the Zoom CEO was on CNN the other day, and CNN threw some really softball questions, and I thought they made a very good excuse for him. Hey, Mr. CEO, you weren't expecting that you become the next Kleenex of video conferencing, and that use would explode. So therefore, security will give you a pass on security. I don't buy that, because right before we started this conversation, I had all of a sudden, you emailed me and said, hey, Keith, what's the password to the meeting?
Yeah.
Which is something that I'm not used to doing in Zoom. And then when you entered the meeting, you were by default left in the waiting area, and I had to come and allow you in. These are not new features in Zoom. These are just knobs that Zoom has turned on, to your point, to make the barrier of entry to using Zoom lower versus its competitors. So it's worked. But how do we get out the message to the users on these, not just Zoom, but Zoom and other services? It could be collaboration tools, it can be file sharing services, etc. We're in this collective experience of using these massively powerful data sharing tools, and the defaults may not suit our organization's security posture.
Good question. So one of the things that I would recommend is that it falls back onto the local IT groups. A lot of times people have said, well, what's the role of local IT when you have these services that are provided by external parties? And it comes back on the internal IT teams to figure out, well, what are the safe settings? What are those recommended knobs to twist and settings to make, so that they can empower their users to still use those tools that have traditionally been labeled shadow IT, but make them more friendly to consume internally. That's from a business perspective.
So I really love that you brought this up, because we have this same challenge on the enterprise side of cloud. Like, we want our customers, internal and external, to move as fast as they can, but in a secure manner. We want you to use AWS's S3 for hosting your data sets that you serve out to the public, because if you're using S3, now you're not using my internal bandwidth, and you're reducing the friction to making changes, etc., all the good stuff. I just don't want you to leave the buckets wide open for people to write to, or put sensitive data in those publicly available buckets.
Yeah. So it's a situation where I think that there are options available for a company like a Zoom or whoever, right? I mean, we're using Zoom, like you said, like Kleenex, where for them to take that next step and really go the enterprise way, it's to understand what enterprises need. And there's a huge shift between consumer and enterprise. And we've seen that happen with Microsoft, where they'll say, hey, here's a tech that's kind of your home version, and then here's the same tech that's the enterprise version. And typically what the differences are the levels of controls at a centralized level, so that a centralized IT group can flip all the right knobs and switches to help protect the others within their environment. And I think that there's now a path forward for some of these vendors if they want to go into the enterprise space.
So for folks in my situation that need to go from using a consumer level tool to enterprise class tool, what generic advice do you have for them?
The best advice is to think about your use case, right? Let's go back to those same questions we asked before. Is what I'm talking about something that's secret? Would I worry if this information were to somehow leak out to outside of my organization? Is this something that makes sense to share with this particular vendor? Because maybe if you're Coke and you're using Pepsi servers, that might be a problem. And just again, just be careful. Hey, are there some recommended settings out there? Just if you're going to take a look at a tool, 2-second Google search, the name of that tool plus security, see what pops up, arm yourself with the data that you need, and go for it.
All right. And last question, are you going to stop using Zoom now?
For personal stuff, no.
No, it has by far been the easiest tool that I've used. I teased that I share the experience that I had at church. So I'm replaying the minister's sermon for the service. And all of a sudden on the screen, I see this writing that says Ed across the video, shared out to, almost 100 people. And I'm pulling wires virtually, like, what's going on? And come to find out, one of the babies in the service had the tablet, and she and turned on the annotation feature in Zoom and just wrote Ed, her dad's name, across the screen. And everyone saw that. And I'm thinking, wow, I have to hunt and peck inside of Zoom to find out how do you disable annotation automatically, because anyone is a collaborative tool and anyone can use it to collaborate.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a funny story.
Yeah, because that could have gone so many different ways.
It could have been way worse than a baby writing Ed across the screen. So Nate, where can people find you?
They can find me on my blog, notyourdadsit.com. I'm there. I'm on Twitter. Yeah.
All right. You can find us on the web at CTO Advisors. My Twitter ID. Register for the virtual conference, which is just less than 2 weeks away as of the recording of this podcast. You can find that at CTOAVC.com, CTO Advisor Virtual Conference.com. Talk to you next, CTO Advisor.